What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the Pika Pika Papa, and I am very excited for this video today because we're going to be looking at a data set that we haven't looked at before, and we're going to be doing a deep dive into chase cards. When is a great time to buy? When's a great time to sit on the sidelines? And what should you do if you did what all of us have been guilty of in the past and you bought at that peak FOMO moment, and now you're on the other side and you're watching the prices of these awesome cards come back down. And the reality is, even though we're going to be doing this data-driven approach, even though we're going to see some really cool and really apparent patterns that are going to form, the reality is none of us have a crystal ball. None of us are going to know what is going to happen into the future. But as I always say, I love taking lessons from the past and applying them to the present to give us some idea of what might happen in the future. So, as I share on this channel all of the time, I started in September of 2023 keeping my own data warehouse, and that was because, TCG players, fantastic, but they only give us 1 year's worth of price movements, and as far as I'm concerned, that's like reading the last chapter of the book, right? Like, you miss all the plot developments and the twists and turns along the way. So as I said, in September of 2023, right around the 15th of every single month, I started recording the top 20 singles card prices, the booster pack prices, the booster box prices, the Elite Trainer box prices from every single regular series set in the Sun and Moon, the Sword and Shield, and the XY era. Now that we're into Scarlet and Violet, I do the same exercise, but I do it for all of the sets, including the specialty sets. So what we've used that data for primarily in the past is we aggregate those top 20 singles cards. So you think about it, 12 different sets, 20 singles cards, so 240 total cards. And we can see how the market has moved over time. And as I said, there's a lot of pattern recognition that happens. We have been able to kind of be on the forefront of understanding when the market is starting to get a little too hot and also when the market is starting to cool off just a little bit. And as we are all aware, the market, at least in the Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet era, is starting to cool off a little bit. But what that represents is some really cool buying opportunities. Now, we all understand the best time to buy anything was yesterday, right? But we don't have a time machine and we can't go back. So these are the 8 chase cards from the Sword and Shield era. And I started with Battle Styles and that Sleepy T-Tar because that was the first alt art. So I wanted to make sure we're specifically looking at alt arts because those were the most desirable. And I've tracked them, as I said, from September 2023. Now, if you had bought one of each of these cards, so if you had bought these 8 cards back in September of 2023, that would have cost you a grand total of $1,735. And if you were to buy that exact same group of 8 cards right around the 15th of last month, that would have cost you an eye-watering $4,266. So from September 2023 to the middle of last month, those groups of cards is up 146%. However, just like with most things, it hasn't moved linearly up and to the right over that period of time. If you look on the far right of this graph that I have here, you will see that that represents the way that total value has moved month over month. So there's blocks of red, followed by blocks of green, followed by blocks of red, and then blocks of green, right? And that's periods of time where the market's getting hot and then the market's softening. So what we're going to talk about today is these very specific Sword and Shield chase cards because obviously Sword and Shield is over. There aren't going to be any massive reprints. We're not going to see, cases of booster boxes all of a sudden showing up on the Pokemon Center or in your local card shop. So I think this is a great opportunity to take a look at it. And as you can see, if you look at the way this aggregate value has moved in March and April, it's actually been coming down a little bit. So we might be at the very beginning or in the middle of, because you never know how long this is going to last, a buying opportunity for some of these really awesome cards. So it's going to be a fantastic video. We're going to have a ton of fun. We're going to look at 3 specific cards that I think are 3 fantastic representations of everything that's going on. But I will say this, I got to give my selfish plug. Obviously, I do a ton of work on the background of this channel. So if you get into this, if you're having fun, if you find value in it, hit that subscribe button or give us a thumbs up. Those 2 small things go a really long way in helping my small channel out, and I really appreciate it. So the 3 cards that we're going to deep dive into today are the Gengar, the Giratina, and the Lugia. And I think this is really interesting to call out because if you look over the last 3 months, all 3 of these cards are down pretty significantly. That Gengar at the very top started at $740, and now it's worked its way all the way down to $594. And the interesting thing about this card is what I'm looking for is where it's going to find support lines. So if you watched my video on Monday where I talked about the singles cards that I'm going after, is I look for some of these big chase cards to form what is a support line. And that's where it just reaches this number, this price point, where whenever it drops below that price point, the market just gobbles it up. Now we'll have to figure out what that is and when it starts to form. Actually, the Gengar and the Giratina, I thought it might start to form right at about $600. And you see that the Gengar up there is starting to flatten out just a little bit at that $594 mark. So maybe it's going to bounce up to $600, but they've already both broken below the $600 barrier. So maybe they'll fall to $575, maybe $550. Like I said, maybe they'll flatten out at $600, but it's going to be very interesting to see how far these fall and how long this little bit of a price regression that we're going through lasts. And the same thing there, the Giratina, like I already said, I've been keeping a close eye on that card. It was up in the $710, $720 range less than 3 months ago. Now it's, like I said, it's broken below the $600 price point right there. So I think that's worthy to discuss. And then the Lugia, I called the Lugia out because that was the very last chase card in the Sword and Shield regular series era, right? That came out in Silver Tempest. That was the last set with a booster box that came out. So I thought that would be a really relevant one since we're, barreling towards the end of Scarlet and Violet. And that's another one. It was up $305 is where it was at less than 3 months ago. And now it's down to $282. Less of a regression there in the Lugia. And we'll talk about why I think that is here in a minute. But I think these are really cool cards for us to discuss and very relevant. Now, I specifically am not talking about the Moonbryon because we have seen time and time again when you look at the Moonbryon, when you look at, say, the Lovebirds card from Team Up, and what I think will happen with the Sunbryon from Prismatic Evolutions, these cards that have these infinitesimal pull rates that are just wildly popular, that go for $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, they trend with the broader market, but they're not indicative of what's going on. These are the grail cards. These are the big ones. People who are out there buying that, they do care a little bit about what the market's going on, but if you got $2,000 to buy a singles card, they just don't move in the same way and the same pattern that most of us are going to see some of these other cards. So that's why I pulled it out. And I think we're going to have a ton of fun. So the first one we're going to do a deep dive into is the Giratina, and we're going to spend a little bit more time on this than the others because I'm going to call out the patterns here, and then we'll just see how the others have kind of followed the same suit over the course of time. So the Giratina here, and this is awesome to see the graphical representation versus just that Excel sheet, because you can really see the periods where we had a flattening out. Like, these were all great opportunities to buy this Giratina card. It didn't last for a month. It didn't last for 2 months. Yes, some months were slightly cheaper than the others, but overall, you have this little bit of a bow mark right here in the graph. And the reality is, and I say this all the time too, is you can't time the market. You can try and time it if you want to. And you know what the odds are? You'll probably get lucky here and there, and you might snag a couple at the absolute bottom. But for me, that's kind of a fool's errand, right? I am looking for fantastic Pokemon cards with amazing artwork of characters that I love from huge sets. And as long as I feel like I'm getting a very fair price for it, I also feel like in the long run, buying it at a fair price is all I really need, because these cards are going to do very, very well in the long run, as you can see here. So you see each of these periods where we had this little kind of a bowl pattern going on. Afterwards, this card shot up in price. Now, the shot up on the second side lasted much longer than the first. But what I wanted to call out too is, what if you did? What if you bought into the FOMO of that very first price spike? That was when Sword and Shield booster boxes were starting to sell out on the Pokemon Center. Everybody was flooding into alt arts. Like, the price spikes were absolutely incredible. So what if you had bought at that first peak and then you spent the next 6 months watching the value of this Giratina plummet? You might have felt a little bad, you might have felt sad, like, who knows? Or maybe you, like me, you're a long-term collector and you understand the fact that, listen, I might have gotten into the FOMO, like, this is a lesson learned for me, I got caught up in the hype, and now the price is coming back down. But in the long run, everything tends to be okay, because as you can see, when it reached the next price spike, which is up here, it's significantly higher than that original FOMO spike. Now, again, we're on the tail end. We're starting to see this price come back down a little bit. So the question is going to be, where is it going to end? How far is it going to fall? Are we going to see the same pattern repeat for a third time, where we have these 3 or 4 months where the buying opportunity is there because the price is starting to dip down a little bit? And then on the backside of that, are we going to see it spike up like we did in these first 2 instances? In my mind, the Pokemon, the space is in a whole new era right now. Supply and demand is totally out of whack. We have more people in the hobby who are spending big dollars than we've ever had before. I mean, let's be honest here. $600 for an ultra-modern Pokemon with a 50% gem rate like this card has, that's a lot of money, and there's not a lot of people out there, at least I think 5, 10, 15 years ago, who would have been spending $600 on a card like this. But now I think there are a lot more, which is awesome. I think it's great for the hobby. So the Giratina has obviously exhibited some really cool buying opportunities in the past, and as I said, we could be in the middle of one right now as well. Next card I promised we were going to talk about is the Gengar. In my opinion, this is the number 2 chase card behind that Moonbreon card in Evolving Skies. Obviously, the Rayquaza from, Evolving Skies is awesome as well, but I just think this one from Fusion Strike is absolutely fantastic. And again, you see the exact same thing here, right? We saw a couple opportunities where the price was really flat for a long period of time. Both of them came after some big price spikes, and both of them had big price spikes after that. And as you can see, this card's dropping really hard. It's broken below the $600 mark, which is just fascinating to me. I can't wait. So I am shooting this video on Sunday. I've got to travel for work, and this is going to drop later in the week. So it's going to be interesting for me to keep an eye on this throughout the course of the week and over the next month. And as I said, I pull all the data on the 15th to see if this card starts to find support, or actually how much further below that $600 mark it could possibly land. And then the Lugia. Now, as I said, the Lugia is a very unique card as it came out in Silver Tempest. If all of you remember, Silver Tempest was the very last booster box to sell out here on the Pokemon Center in the US. Silver Tempest, I remember sitting back here and doing my monthly video where I talk about what I'm going after, and it seemed like every single month I was like, man, Silver Tempest is going to sell out any month now. You need to be buying it. You need to be adding it to your collection. And that went on and on and on, and it just never seemed to sell out. So the reason I think this card has seen less of a dip versus the others was because the price spike on this card happened so much later. We didn't really see this card start to take off until it sold out in the Pokemon Center, which makes sense. A lot of times scarcity is what drives price, and obviously if you can buy this card at MSRP, or not buy the card, but if you can buy the booster box at MSRP, pretty easily on the Pokemon Center, then it just took a while for this card to unlock. But awesome card right here. Obviously Lugia is one of the biggest names in the Pokemon space. This alt art is absolutely fantastic. But again, the same thing, you can actually see we had these awesome buying opportunities, and it did follow the same pattern as the broader market. Now, it's not dropping as aggressively there on the right-hand side like we saw in the previous graph with the Giratina, or we saw in the graph right before this with the Gengar, but we'll see. And the overall price point, remember, those other two are just shy of $600 right now, and this one is sitting there at like $285. So again, lower starting point, lower drop, but I do think this card is equally awesome. And as Silver Tempest gets farther and farther in our rear view mirror, I wouldn't be surprised to see this card continue to grow in value. So this is kind of one of the ones that's a sneaky card on my buy list right now. So that's it. I hope this was really cool. I hope you enjoyed this content. I have all of this data going back to September 2023. I have it for the top chase cards. I have it for any of the top 20 cards, booster boxes, booster packs, ETBs. And like I said, I take a lot of pride in having that. I think it gives us some really awesome looks at what's going on, and hopefully gives us a little extra kind of peek behind the curtains of what's happening at the macro level. So if you enjoyed this video, if you found it insightful, I hope you'll come along with us for all of the future videos by hitting that subscribe button or giving us a thumbs up. Hey, most importantly, I thank you for watching, and I hope you have an epic rest of your day. I'll talk to you all soon. See you, everybody. Bye.